The chrome glinted under the fluorescent lights of a roadside diner just outside Ridgeline, Montana, a forgotten town where the highway split like a wound through mountains and prairie. Inside, leather-worn men sat in silence over black coffee, their jackets bearing the winged skull insignia of a club that answered to no one. They were ghosts of another war, bound by oaths older than the asphalt they rode. And on that cold October morning, a girl no older than 16 walked through their door with trembling hands and eyes that had seen too much grief too soon. Her name was Marlo Kenner, and she carried a photograph, faded and creased, of a man in a Hells Angels vest standing beside a German shepherd at the gates of Safe Harbor Animal Shelter. The man had been dead for 3 years. The shelter was scheduled for demolition in 72 hours, and Marlo believed that somewhere in the worn promises of the past, these riders held the key to saving the only home she'd ever truly known. What she didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that the closure was no accident. Behind the paperwork, the zoning violations. In the city council's unanimous vote, there was money. Dark money, and a developer named Grissom Vantage, who'd built an empire on stolen land and silenced voices. The shelter sat on 12 acres of prime real estate, bordered by the river and untouched by commercial development. It was worth millions, and Vantage wanted it buried. But Marlo's plea stirred something the bikers hadn't felt in years. The weight of an old promise, the kind made over whiskey and blood, the kind you don't break, even after death. The man in the photograph was Thorne Mackley, their brother, their sergeant-at-arms, the one who'd pulled half of them out of the dark after the war. Before he died, he'd made them swear, if anything happens to that shelter, you ride. You ride until it's safe. Within 48 hours, 17 Hells Angels chapters across 3 states mobilized. What began as a girl's desperate plea became a reckoning that would shake Ridgeline to its foundations. And what happened inside City Hall that Friday evening would make national news, not for violence, but for the kind of justice the system had long forgotten how to deliver. This is the story of a promise kept, a shelter saved, and the moment a town learned that honor still rides on 2 wheels. The bell above the diner door chimed once, a thin, tired sound that barely cut through the rumble of diesel engines idling outside. Marlo Kenner stepped inside. Her sneakers, scuffing against linoleum worn smooth by decades of boots and coffee spills. The air smelled like burnt toast and motor oil, and every eye in the room turned toward her. She was 16, too thin, with dirt under her fingernails and a canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. Her hair was pulled into a messy braid, and her jeans were patched at the knees. But it was her eyes that held them. Grey, direct, and carrying a weight no teenager should know. If you're hearing this story for the first time, drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're listening from. We want to know how far these roads reach. The bikers sat in a loose semicircle near the back, their leather cuts draped over the booth like battle standards. The patches told stories, winged skulls, chapter names stitched in faded thread, service ribbons from wars most people had forgotten. The man at the center, broad-shouldered, graying beard, eyes like flint, was named Rook Halverson. He was the chapter president, and he'd been riding these roads since before Marlo was born. Marlo walked straight to their table. No hesitation, no fear. "I need your help," she said. The diner went quiet. Even the cook stopped flipping eggs. Rook didn't move. He studied her the way a man studies an unexpected storm, with respect and caution. That so? She reached into her backpack and pulled out the photograph. She set it on the table between two coffee mugs, her hand shaking just slightly. You knew him, Thorn Mackley. He died 3 years ago. Before he did, he made you promise something. The silence deepened. Rook's jaw tightened. Beside him, a man with scarred knuckles and a patch that read gravel leaned forward, his eyes locking on the photo. Safe harbor, Gravel said quietly. The shelter. Marlowe nodded. They're shutting it down. 72 hours. The city council voted unanimously. They say it's zoning violations, but that's a lie. Someone wants the land, and if it closes, 43 dogs, 18 cats, and God knows how many other animals are going to die. Thorn built that place. He saved it once, and he asked you to do the same if it ever happened again. Rook picked up the photograph. His thumb traced the edge where Thorn stood grinning beside a scarred shepherd named Gunner. That dog had saved Thorn's life in Kandahar, and when Thorn came home broken and angry, it was the animals at Safe Harbor that had stitched him back together. You work there? Rook asked. I lived there, Marlowe said. My mum died when I was 12. Foster care didn't work out. Thorn took me in, let me sleep in the office, fed me, taught me how to care for the animals. When he died, the director, Miss Calloway, kept me on. It's the only home I've got left. Another biker spoke up, a wiry man with a shaved head and forearms covered in ink. His patch read Mercer. You got proof the vote was dirty? Marlowe pulled out a manila folder. Inside were printed emails, land appraisal documents, and a receipt for a wire transfer from a shell company to 3 city council members. I got these from Miss Calloway's office. She's been trying to fight it legally for 6 months, but every lawyer in town is scared. The developer, Grissom Vantage, owns half the county. No one wants to cross him. Rook exchanged a glance with Gravel. Then he pushed the photograph back toward Marlowe. We'll look into it. I don't need you to look, Marlowe said, her voice steady. I need you to ride. Thorn told me once that if the shelter was ever in danger, the angels would come. He said promises made over whiskey and blood don't break, so I'm asking you to keep his. Rook stood, 6'3", 240 pounds of scar tissue and conviction. He picked up the folder, flipped through it once, then tucked it under his arm. Where's this city council meeting? Friday, 7 p.m. City Hall. We'll be there. Marlowe's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Rook nodded once. Don't thank us yet. You just started something, kid. And once it starts, it doesn't stop until it's finished. As Marlowe left, the bell chimed again, small and fragile against the weight of what had just been set in motion. Rook didn't speak for the first 20 miles. He rode alone, leading the pack north along Highway 89, the mountains rising like teeth against a bruised sky. Behind him, 16 bikes followed in tight formation, Gravel, Mercer, a man named Oxley, who'd lost an eye in Fallujah, and a woman called Flint who could strip an engine blindfolded. They were all that remained of Thorn's generation, the ones who'd come home to find the world had moved on without them. The shelter sat on the eastern edge of Ridgeline, tucked between a stretch of cottonwoods and the Clearwater River. It was a low-slung building with peeling blue paint and a hand-carved sign that read Safe Harbor in letters Thorn had burned into wood himself. The parking lot was empty except for a rusted pickup truck and a sedan with a cracked windshield. Rook killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy with memory. Last time I was here, Gravel said quietly. Thorn was still alive. He was out back, building the new kennels. Said he wanted every animal to have a window, something about sunlight being the only free medicine. Mercer nodded. He was different here, calmer, like the dogs took the edge off the nightmares. Rook dismounted and walked toward the front entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and kibble, and somewhere deeper in the building a dog barked, sharp and insistent. A woman appeared from a side hallway. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a ponytail and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her name tag read, Director Calloway. She stopped when she saw the leather cuts, her expression shifting from surprise to something close to hope. "You're the ones Marlowe talked to," she said. "That's right," Rook replied. "We need to see the paperwork, all of it." Calloway led them to a cramped office stacked with folders and donation receipts. She spread the documents across the desk. City ordinances, inspection reports, violation notices stamped with official seals. Rook scanned each one, his jaw tightening with every page. "These violations," he said, tapping a sheet. "Half of them are fabricated. Insufficient drainage system. You've got a brand new septic tank installed 2 years ago. I know because Thorne paid for it out of pocket." "And this one," Flint added, holding up another report. "Unsafe proximity to residential zone. The nearest house is 3 miles away." Calloway sank into her chair. "I know. I fought it for months. But every time I file an appeal, it gets denied. The council won't even let me speak at the meetings anymore. It's like they've already decided." Gravel leaned against the doorframe. "Who's pushing this? Who benefits?" "Grissom Vantage," Calloway said. "He's a developer, made his fortune buying up land during the housing crash and flipping it for commercial use. He wants this property for a luxury resort, river access, mountain views. It's worth millions, and the city council is in his pocket." Rook pulled out his phone and dialed. The call connected on the second ring. "Patch me through to Decker." "Yeah, I'll wait." 30 seconds later, a gravelly voice came through the speaker. "Rook, what do you need?" "Background check. Name's Grissom Vantage. Developer operates out of Ridgeline, Montana. I want everything. Financials, connections, dirt. Fast. Give me 6 hours. You've got 4. Rook ended the call and turned back to Calloway. "Thorne made us a promise before he died. He said if anything happened to this place, we'd ride, so we're riding, but we need something from you. Anything. Friday's meeting. We're going to be there, and we're going to make sure every person in that room knows what Vantage is doing. But for that to work, we need you to stand up and speak. Can you do that?" Calloway's hands trembled slightly. "They'll try to shut me down." "Let them try," Rook said. "We'll make sure they hear you." Outside, the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows across the kennels. A shepherd mix barked once, sharp and clear, as if acknowledging the pact being made inside. By midnight, Decker had sent through a file thick enough to bury a man. Rook spread the pages across the table in the clubhouse, a converted garage on the outskirts of town, where the angels gathered when the world needed answering to. The air smelled like engine grease and bourbon, and the only light came from a single overhead bulb, swinging gently in the draught. Gravel read aloud, his voice low and steady. "Grissom Vantage, 52 years old, CEO of Vantage Development LLC, net worth estimated at $43 million. Built his fortune buying distressed properties during the '08 crash and converting them into strip malls and luxury resorts." "Legal troubles?" Mercer asked. 3 lawsuits in the past 5 years, Gravel continued, all settled out of court. 2 for environmental violations, 1 for alleged bribery of a county zoning board in Wyoming, no convictions, sealed records. Flint tapped a page near the bottom of the stack. Look at this. Wire transfer. $200,000 from a shell company called Ridgeline Holdings, LLC, to 3 city council members, Mayor Grayson, Councilman Derrick, and Councilwoman Voss, dated 6 weeks before the shelter's closure vote. Rook picked up the transfer receipt, his eyes narrowing. Ridgeline Holdings, that's Vantage's company. He's not even hiding it well. Oxley leaned forward, his one good eye scanning the documents. So what's the play? We go public. Not yet, Rook said. If we go public now, Vantage will bury it with lawyers. We need leverage, something that forces the council to reverse the vote on record. Gravel stood and walked to the wall where a county map was pinned. He traced a line from the shelter to a parcel marked in red ink. Look at this. Vantage doesn't just want the shelter land. He's buying up the entire riverfront, 4 properties in the past 18 months, all rezoned for commercial development. The shelter is the last piece. If he gets it, he controls the whole corridor. And the town loses access to the river, Flint said. That's public land. He's privatizing it. Rook's jaw tightened. We need testimony. Someone on the inside who'll talk. Someone Vantage can't silence. Mercer pulled out his phone. I know a guy. Used to work for the county assessor's office. Got fired last year after he tried to blow the whistle on a land deal. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it's him. Get him, Rook said, and tell him we'll keep him safe. By 3 a.m., the pieces were in place. The testimony was secured, the evidence was compiled, and 17 Hells Angels chapters across Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho had been put on standby. Friday was 2 days away, and Ridgeline was about to learn what it meant when a promise made in blood came due. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. Thursday morning broke cold and grey, the kind of dawn that promised snow before nightfall. Rook stood outside the clubhouse, his phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with chapter presidents across 3 states. The response had been immediate. Thorne Mackley's name still carried weight, and the story of a teenage girl standing up to a corrupt developer had spread like wildfire through the network. How many? Gravel asked, stepping outside with 2 mugs of coffee. 47 riders confirmed, Rook said. Another 20 on standby. They're rolling out at noon. Should be here by 6. Gravel whistled low. That's a lot of iron for a town this size. That's the point. Rook took the coffee, his breath misting in the cold air. Vantage thinks he's untouchable because he owns the council. But he doesn't own the people, and when the people see what we're bringing, they'll remember they've got a choice. Inside, Flint was on her laptop, pulling together a digital file of all the evidence, wire transfers, emails, inspection reports, testimony from the former county assessor. She'd also hacked into the city's public records system and pulled the voting history for every council member over the past 3 years. The pattern was clear. Every vote that benefited Vantage development had passed unanimously. Every opposition had been silenced. Mercer walked in carrying a cardboard box. Got the flyers printed, 5,000 copies. We're gonna blanket the town. Rook picked up one of the flyers. It was simple, black text on white paper. At the top, in bold letters, your city council is for sale. Below that, a list of the wire transfers, the council members' names, and a single line at the bottom, City Hall. Friday, 7 p.m. Come see the truth. Good, Rook said. Start distributing. Coffee shops, grocery stores, gas stations. I want every person in Ridgeline to see this before tomorrow night. By midday, the town was buzzing. People stopped on sidewalks to read the flyers. Phones lit up with texts and social media posts. The local radio station picked up the story, and by 3 p.m., a reporter from the county newspaper had called Director Calloway, asking for a statement. At the shelter, Marlowe was walking the dogs when she heard the sound of engines, not one or two, but a low, rolling thunder that made the ground vibrate. She walked to the front gate and stopped. 47 motorcycles lined the road, stretching back as far as she could see. The riders wore cuts from different chapters: Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, even one from North Dakota. At the front, Rook sat astride his Harley, his expression unreadable. He killed the engine and walked toward her. "We came to check on you and to let you know you're not alone in this." Marlowe's throat tightened. I didn't know this many people would care." "Thorne cared," Rook said. "That's all that matters, and tomorrow we're going to make sure everyone in that room knows what he stood for." That night, the bikers set up camp in the field behind the shelter. They built fires, shared stories, and kept watch over the property like sentinels guarding sacred ground. Marlowe sat with them, listening as they talked about Thorne, the missions he'd led, the brothers he'd saved, the promises he'd kept. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she wasn't carrying the weight of his memory alone. Friday morning came with frost on the windows and a brittle tension in the air. Ridgeline had never seen anything like this. By 8 a.m., City Hall's parking lot was full. By 10, people were lining up outside, clutching flyers and demanding answers. The mayor's office issued a terse statement, saying the meeting would proceed as scheduled, but several council members had already received threats to resign. Grissom Vantage sat in his downtown office, a glass tower overlooking the river, and watched the gathering crowd through floor-to-ceiling windows. He was a man who believed power came from leverage, money, influence, fear. He'd crushed union organizers, silenced whistleblowers, and buried opposition under mountains of legal paperwork. A girl and some bikers didn't scare him. But his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Cordelia Breen, was less confident. "They've got the wire transfers, Grissom, and testimony from the assessor. If this goes public, you'll face federal charges." "Then make sure it doesn't go public," Vantage said coolly. "Pay off whoever needs paying. Threaten whoever needs threatening. I didn't build this empire by backing down." At the shelter, Marlowe stood in front of the mirror in the office bathroom, smoothing down her shirt. She'd never spoken in public before. The idea of standing up in front of the entire town, in front of Vantage, made her stomach twist. But she thought of Thorne. He taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing what needed to be done, even when your hands shook. Rook knocked on the doorframe. "You ready?" Marlowe turned. "I don't know." "Good," Rook said. "Fear keeps you sharp. Just remember, you're not alone up there. We'll be right behind you." At 6 p.m., the convoy rolled out. 47 motorcycles, engines rumbling in perfect formation, moving through the streets of Ridgeline like a wave of steel and sound. People stopped on sidewalks to watch. Some waved, others filmed on their phones. By the time they reached City Hall, The crowd had swelled to over 300 people, more than the building could hold. Inside, the council members sat behind a raised platform, their faces pale and drawn. Mayor Grayson banged the gavel, calling for order, but his voice wavered. In the back of the room, Rook stood with his arms crossed, flanked by Gravel, Mercer, Flint, and Oxley. The message was clear. "We're not leaving." Marlowe stepped to the podium, her heart pounding. She looked out at the sea of faces, neighbors, strangers, reporters with cameras, and took a breath. "My name is Marlowe Kenner," she began, "and I'm here to save Safe Harbor Animal Shelter." Marlowe's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the podium so tightly her knuckles turned white. The room was silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of old wooden chairs. Every eye was on her. The council, the crowd, the bikers standing like sentries along the back wall. "3 years ago," she continued, "a man named Thorne Mackley saved my life. I was 12. My mom had just died. Foster care didn't work. I ran. I ended up at Safe Harbor because I heard they took in strays. Thorne found me sleeping in the kennel with a shepherd mix named Gunner. He didn't call the cops. He didn't lecture me. He just said, 'You want to stay? Earn it.' So I did." She paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. Some were familiar: shopkeepers, teachers, people who'd donated blankets and kibble over the years. Others were strangers, but all of them were listening. Thorne built that shelter with his own hands. He mortgaged his house to keep it running. He took in animals no one else would touch. The sick ones, the aggressive ones, the ones people said weren't worth saving, and he saved them, every single one. When he died, he left behind a promise. He told the Hells Angels that if anything ever threatened Safe Harbor, they had to ride. And that's why they're here tonight." Rook shifted his weight, his arms still crossed, his expression unreadable. But there was pride in his eyes. Marlowe turned toward the council. "You voted to close the shelter. You said it was zoning violations, but that's a lie, and I can prove it." She pulled out a folder and held it up. "These are wire transfers. $200,000 from Ridgeline Holdings LLC, a shell company owned by Grissom Vantage, to 3 members of this council: Mayor Grayson, Councilman Derrick, Councilwoman Voss. The money was transferred 6 weeks before the vote, and every single violation cited in the closure notice is fabricated." The room erupted. People shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Mayor Grayson banged the gavel, his face flushed. "Order! I will have order!" But the crowd didn't settle. A man in the front row stood. "Is that true, Mayor? Did you take money from Vantage?" Grayson stammered. This is a gross misrepresentation." "Answer the question," someone shouted from the back. Flint stepped forward, holding up a laptop. "I've got the bank records right here, public record. Anyone want to see them?" Derrick, the councilman, stood abruptly. "This is a witch hunt. We followed proper legal procedures." "Legal?" Mercer cut in, his voice sharp. "You took a bribe and shut down a non-profit. That's not legal. That's corruption." The tension in the room tightened like a coiled spring. Rook stepped forward, his boots echoing on the hardwood floor. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded attention. "We're not here for violence," Rook said. "We're here for truth. And the truth is this. Grissom Vantage paid 3 of you to steal land from this community. He wants to build a resort. He wants to privatize the river. And he's willing to destroy a shelter that saved hundreds of lives to do it." He turned toward the crowd. "But here's the thing. Vantage doesn't own this town, you do. And if you let this slide, if you let them close Safe Harbor without a fight, then you're telling every developer, every politician, every corrupt official that Ridgeline is for sale. Is that who you are? The room erupted again, but this time it wasn't chaos. It was solidarity. People stood, clapping, shouting for the council to reverse the vote. A woman near the front held up a sign, "Save Safe Harbor." Others joined her. Director Calloway stepped to the podium next. Her voice was steady, years of grief and determination packed into every word. "I've run that shelter for 15 years. I've seen what it does for this community, and I'm not letting it close without a fight. If this council won't protect it, then the people will." The applause was deafening. If this story has moved you, hit that like button and let us know you're standing with Safe Harbor. Every voice counts. Grissom Vantage watched the live stream from his office, his jaw tight. His lawyer, Cordelia Breen, stood beside him, her arms crossed. "They've got everything, Grissom. The transfers, the testimony, the bank records. If this goes to a federal investigation, you're done." Vantage didn't respond. He was calculating, running scenarios the way he always did. He'd faced worse: union strikes, environmental lawsuits, politicians who tried to grow a conscience halfway through a deal. And he'd won every time, not through force, through leverage. He picked up his phone and dialed. The call connected on the second ring. "It's Vantage. I need you at City Hall, now." 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up to the front entrance. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a tailored suit. Councilman Derrick's brother-in-law, a lawyer named Preston Wolfe. He was Vantage's closer, the man he brought in when subtlety failed. Inside the council chambers, the debate had devolved into shouting matches. People demanded resignations. The mayor tried to adjourn the meeting, but the crowd refused to leave. That's when Preston Wolfe walked in. He moved to the center of the room, his presence cutting through the noise like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may." The room quieted slightly. Wolfe smiled. Polished, practiced, predatory. "My name is Preston Wolfe. I represent Vantage Development, and I'd like to offer a solution." Rook's eyes narrowed. "This should be good." Wolfe continued. "Mr. Vantage has heard the concerns of this community, and out of respect for the work Safe Harbor has done, he's willing to withdraw his development plans. On one condition." "Here we go," Gravel muttered. "Mr. Vantage will donate $200,000 to Safe Harbor," Wolfe said, "enough to cover operating costs for the next 5 years. In exchange, the shelter relocates to a property Mr. Vantage owns on the north side of town. It's larger, newer, and better suited for expansion. The council reverses the closure vote. Everyone wins." The room fell silent. It was a good offer. Too good. Marlowe looked at Rook, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. But Rook was already moving. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "And what happens to the riverfront land?" Wolfe's smile didn't waver. "It remains in Mr. Vantage's portfolio. He has plans for mixed-use development, residential and commercial. It'll bring jobs, tax revenue, and private ownership of public river access." Rook interrupted. "You're offering them a bribe to look the other way, while you steal from the town." "That's a cynical interpretation," Wolfe said smoothly. "It's the truth." Rook turned to the crowd. "He's betting you'll take the easy way out. But let me ask you something. What happens in 5 years when that property he's offering gets rezoned? What happens when Safe Harbor has to move again? Vantage doesn't make deals out of kindness. He makes them because he's already won. Marlowe stood. We're not taking his money. Safe Harbor stays where it is, on the land Thorne built, or it doesn't exist at all. The crowd roared in approval. Wolf's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. No, Rook said. You are. The council chamber descended into chaos. Preston Wolfe stormed out, his phone pressed to his ear, his polished shoes clicking against marble floors with sharp, angry precision. Through the glass doors, Marlowe could see him gesturing wildly, his face flushed beneath the parking lot lights, no doubt updating Vantage that the bribe had failed spectacularly. Inside, the mayor called for a recess, but no one moved. The crowd had tasted blood, and they weren't letting go. People stood shoulder to shoulder, some holding homemade signs, others filming on phones held high like digital torches. The air was thick with body heat and righteousness, the kind that comes when ordinary people realize they've been lied to for too long. In the hallway outside the main chamber, Rook gathered the core group: Gravel, Mercer, Flint, Oxley and Marlowe. The corridor was quieter here, insulated from the roar of the crowd, but the tension hummed like a live wire. "He's going to escalate," Rook said, his voice low and deliberate. "Vantage doesn't lose gracefully. Men like him, they're used to buying their way out of corners. When that doesn't work, they get dangerous. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." Flint held up her phone, the screen glowing with notifications. "Already on it. I've been live tweeting this whole thing. Save Safe Harbor is trending locally. 6,000 retweets in the last hour. If he tries anything now, threats, intimidation, legal games, the whole state will be watching." Oxley nodded, his scarred face illuminated by the fluorescent lights overhead. "And I've got 3 news vans outside. Channel 7, Channel 11, and a stringer from the AP. They're not leaving without a story. This is officially bigger than Ridgeline now." Mercer cracked his knuckles, a nervous habit from his Marine Corps days. "What about the council? You think they'll actually reverse the vote, or are they going to stall until this blows over?" "They'll vote," Rook said, "because if they don't, we'll make sure every single person in this town knows their names, their addresses, and how much they sold out for. Sunlight's the best disinfectant." Marlowe leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly feeling weak. The adrenaline that had carried her through her testimony was draining fast, leaving behind exhaustion and the weight of what they'd just done. "What if it's not enough?" she asked quietly. "What if Vantage still wins?" Rook turned to her, his expression softening just slightly. "Kid, you stood up in front of 300 people and called out corruption. You brought receipts. You didn't back down when they offered you money. Vantage has already lost. He just doesn't know it yet." Inside the chamber, the former county assessor, a man named Leonard Finch, took the podium. He was thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and nearly his marriage, trying to expose what Vantage had done. But tonight, under the fluorescent lights of City Hall, surrounded by people who finally believed him, he found his voice. "My name is Leonard Finch," he began. "I worked for Ridgeline County as a senior assessor for 12 years. I was fired last October after I tried to report irregularities in land appraisals tied to Vantage development. I was told to keep quiet. When I didn't, they manufactured a reason to let me go." He paused, scanning the room. Some faces were familiar. Co-workers who'd turned their backs, neighbors who'd stopped waving, but others were new. Allies. "I've got documents," he continued, holding up a thick folder bound with rubber bands. Emails, appraisal reports, meeting minutes spanning 3 years. They show that Vantage systematically undervalued properties he wanted to acquire, sometimes by as much as 40% below market rate. Then, after purchase, he'd get new appraisals inflating the value to maximize tax benefits and loan leverage. It's fraud, textbook fraud. He opened the folder and pulled out a printed email. His voice grew stronger. "This is from Councilman Derrick to Vantage's Chief Financial Officer. Quote, we can smooth the appraisal process if the contribution clears by Friday. That contribution, $200,000 split 3 ways. Mayor Grayson, Councilman Derrick, Councilwoman Voss." The room erupted. People shouted questions, accusations, demands for justice. A woman in the third row stood and pointed at the council platform. "You sold us out. You sold our town." Mayor Grayson's face had gone from red to grey. He gripped the gavel like a lifeline, his knuckles white. These are serious allegations that require proper investigation." "Investigation's already happening," Finch said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I submitted everything to the State Attorney General's office 2 weeks ago. They've opened a formal inquiry into public corruption, bribery, and racketeering. And as of this morning, the FBI has been notified." The silence that followed was deafening. Councilwoman Voss stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "I didn't know it was illegal. I thought it was just a campaign contribution. He said it was legal." $200,000 isn't a contribution," Mercer said from the back of the room, his voice sharp as broken glass. "That's a payoff, and you knew it." Voss sat down hard, her hands covering her face. Derrick stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. The mayor looked like a man watching his entire career collapse in real time, which, in fairness, he was. Outside, beneath the harsh glow of parking lot sodium lights, Grissom Vantage stood beside his black SUV, his phone buzzing with updates every 30 seconds. His lawyer, Cordelia Breen, had abandoned subtlety entirely. "You need to leave town. Tonight. The Attorney General's office will issue a subpoena by morning." But Vantage wasn't listening. He was scrolling through the live stream, watching his carefully constructed empire unravel in high definition. 47 bikers, a teenage girl, a disgraced assessor. They'd brought the light, and once the light was on, there was nowhere left to hide. He'd built his fortune on leverage, knowing people's weaknesses, their debts, their secrets. But these people, they had nothing to lose, and that made them untouchable. Inside, the council reconvened. Mayor Grayson's hand trembled as he picked up the gavel. His voice was barely above a whisper. "In light of the testimony presented tonight, and pending further investigation by state and federal authorities, I move to immediately reverse the closure order for Safe Harbor Animal Shelter. The property will retain its current zoning and non-profit status indefinitely. All in favor?" 3 hands went up. 2 abstained, staring at the table. The motion passed. The room erupted in applause, not polite, performative clapping, but raw. Cathartic noise. People hugged strangers. Cameras flashed. Marlowe collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with relief and exhaustion. Rook placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Thorne would be proud, kid." She looked up at him, her voice hoarse. "We did it. We actually did it." "Yeah," Rook said, a rare smile crossing his weathered face. We did. By the time the meeting officially adjourned, it was past midnight. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, as if afraid that leaving might somehow undo what had just happened. People lingered in the parking lot, shaking hands with the bikers, asking for photos, sharing stories of animals they'd adopted from Safe Harbor over the years. A man in his 60s, tears in his eyes, told Gravel how a shelter dog had saved his life after his wife died. A mother with 2 young daughters thanked Flint for standing up when no one else would. Director Calloway stood outside the shelter gates when the convoy rolled back in, her silhouette framed by the security lights mounted above the kennels. She'd been listening to the live stream on her phone, pacing the gravel driveway for 3 hours, her heart in her throat. When she saw the headlights cutting through the darkness, 47 bikes in tight formation, their engines rumbling like distant thunder, she wept openly, not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt like prayer. Rook killed his engine first. The others followed suit one by one, until the night fell silent, except for the sound of cooling metal ticking and a dog barking somewhere deep inside the building. Calloway walked toward them, her voice breaking. I heard everything. I can't. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank us," Rook said, dismounting. "Thank her." He nodded toward Marlowe, who was climbing off the back of Gravel's bike, her legs unsteady. Calloway pulled Marlowe into a fierce embrace. "You were so brave, so impossibly brave." "I was terrified," Marlowe admitted, her voice muffled against Calloway's shoulder. "That's what brave means," Calloway said. The bikers set up one last campfire in the field behind the shelter, a quiet ritual, a way to mark the end of something significant. They didn't talk much, just sat on overturned crates and saddlebags, drinking coffee from thermoses, watching the flames dance against the darkness. Somewhere in the kennel, a chorus of dogs howled, long, mournful and strangely triumphant. Mercer broke the silence. "Anyone check the news?" Flint pulled out her phone, scrolling. Front page of the state website. Bikers expose city council corruption. Save animal shelter. 300,000 views and counting. AP picked it up. So did CNN. Oxley whistled low. Thorne would have loved that. National news for a dog shelter. He would have hated the attention, Gravel corrected. But yeah, he'd have loved the outcome. The next morning, Ridgeline woke to a transformed reality. Headlines screamed across newspapers and smartphone screens. Bikers save shelter, expose corruption. Federal investigation launched into Ridgeline City Council. Developer Grissom Vantage under scrutiny. By noon, Mayor Grayson had resigned via a terse written statement read by his lawyer. By 3 p.m., recall petitions had been filed against Councilman Derrick and Councilwoman Voss. By evening, both had stepped down. The State Attorney General's office issued a press release confirming that criminal charges were being considered. And Grissom Vantage, he disappeared. His office went dark. His lawyers stopped returning calls. Rumors swirled that he'd fled to a property in the Cayman Islands, but no one could confirm it. What mattered was that his grip on Ridgeline had been broken. Not by violence, not by money, but by the truth delivered in a room full of witnesses. At Safe Harbor, life slowly returned to its rhythm. Dogs barked in the kennels at dawn. Volunteers showed up with donations, bags of kibble, blankets, toys. A local veterinary clinic offered free spay and neuter services for 6 months. The town, shaken awake by what had almost been lost, rallied. 3 days after the council meeting, a new photograph appeared on the office wall beside the old one of Thorn. It was taken Friday night. Marlowe at the podium, her hands gripping the edges, her face illuminated by overhead lights. And behind her, barely visible in the shadows, 47 bikers standing like a wall of steel and honor. Rook stopped by one last time before the convoy left for good. He found Marlowe in the south yard, throwing a tennis ball for a shepherd mix named Scout, a dog that had come in 3 weeks ago, abused and terrified, who was now wagging his tail and bounding through the grass like he'd been reborn. "You did good, kid," Rook said, leaning against the fence. Marlowe turned, shielding her eyes from the sun. "I didn't do it alone." "No, but you started it. That takes guts." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased and yellowed with age. "Thorn wrote this the week before he died. He asked me to give it to you if you ever needed it. I think now's the time." Marlowe took the note carefully, as if it might disintegrate in her hands. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was shaky. Thorn's hands had trembled in his final days, but the words were clear and deliberate. "Marlowe, if you're reading this, it means the shelter's in trouble. And it means Rook kept his promise. I always knew you were stronger than you thought. Don't let anyone tell you different. The dogs know. They've always known. And now, so does the world. Keep fighting. Keep saving. That's what we do. Thorn." She read it twice, then 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket, right over her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. Rook nodded once, then turned and walked toward his bike. The engines roared to life one by one, a sound like thunder rolling across the valley, primal and powerful. The convoy pulled out in formation, disappearing down Highway 89, leaving only dust and the fading rumble of exhaust. Marlowe stood in the yard, Scout sitting beside her, the sun breaking through the clouds in shafts of gold. She thought about Thorn, about promises, about the 47 strangers who'd ridden hundreds of miles because a dead man had asked them to. And she understood finally what he'd been trying to teach her all along, that some debts can only be paid in miles, that honor isn't loud or flashy, it's quiet, steady, and it shows up when it matters most. Safe harbor was safe, the promise was kept, and the road stretched on. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If it moved you, if it reminded you that honor still exists on these roads, then hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories like this, stories of promises kept, of loyalty tested, of the quiet riders who stand between corruption and justice. Until the next ride, stay strong. And remember, some debts can only be paid in miles.